we're going to be talking about change management. Yvette Ulliger and Angie Keister are here, experts in their field, and going to be telling us some very interesting stories about the use of technology in change management. Before we get stuck into the presentation, I'll just quickly outline the format. We're having a short session in here, about 20 minutes of discussion about the topics around change management, some case studies and some examples of what we've been doing, and also a little bit of future casting to look at what's coming down the line. After the short panel session, we'll be jumping into a bit of Q&A, so you can ask any questions, and then we'll be jumping into the network area where we'll be able to talk to each other, but also to some AI bots that will be joining us. So that should be fun and interesting. So to get started, let's just get a bit of an introduction from Yvette and Angie. If you can please just give us a little introduction about your history and what's led you to this event today.
Okay. Do you want me to start, Angie?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Hi, everyone. Yvette Williger, and I currently work for Glanbia. I am the Senior Director for Global Benefits and Compliance. I've been in this role several months, but prior to that, I led the HR BPO implementation. I have over 25 years of experience in human resources, inclusive of HR transformation, I'd say the last 15 years, but also health and welfare in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. So anything related to pensions, benefits, compliance, you name it. And HR transformation is also something that's very near and dear to me. So happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. My name is Angie Keister, and I am the founder and president of Attune Collective, which
is an organization development and change consulting firm specializing in the people and behavioral side of organizational change. I have been an internal practitioner of organization development and change for many years across various industries.
I've been doing that as an in-house practitioner for many years and also as an external consultant. So I'm very excited to be talking about the use of this technology and also how we used it in a recent change, HR transformation at Glanbia. So appreciate you being here and also appreciate Yvette coming as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Dan.
And just a little bit about myself. I'm Danny Stefanik. I'm the CEO of Hyperspace, the platform that we're in today. But my history in HR goes back nearly 30 years, with a more recent investment in time into change management, thanks to Angie's kind of breakthrough research and perspective that has really opened my eyes to some pretty interesting things. So I think we're going to discuss some interesting topics today, but one of the most interesting to me is the case study for Glanbia. And you know, I'd love to hear a little bit about that, Yvette. I mean, it's a large-scale HR-led change across 23 countries. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that and you know the processes involved. If you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience, we've also got a few slides up the top, which if you look up, you can see them. And Angie, if you want to change the slides that are up, that are relevant to what the topics are that Yvette's covering, that would be great.
Sure.
Okay. So I can start out by speaking to the project that that I led for Glanbia. The goal was to outsource and move to a BPO. In order to do that, what is highly recommended is that you ensure you have your processes harmonized and your policies as well. Danny mentioned 23 countries. That is correct. We didn't do it all in one full swoop. So this is a project that was done in phases. You had a phase one where we did target 14 of the countries, and then the remaining 13, or the remaining difference, will be going live by the end of the year. What we did is, the first thing we did is to make sure that we had all our processes documented, which we did not, but we did finally get to that point. Quite honestly, we have about 130 processes. The shared services model that we had serviced UK, Ireland, and the US, which is predominantly where our folks are located. Knowing that those processes were harmonized and standardized for the 3 major countries, we then proceeded to meet with the remaining countries: China, Sweden, UAE, Netherlands, France, etc. India, we can't forget India. So what we did is we then met with each of the country, selected representative within human resources to review the processes and to ensure if there were any call-outs. If there were, then we then knew that we would have to create a sub-process. I'll give an example: hiring an employee. So it would be maybe, we have a standard process, but maybe in Germany it's done slightly different, which actually we do have a step up because of the Works Council. So we made sure that we documented that as well. While I had a team working on that, I also had a separate team working on the policies. We collected all of the policies. We focused on leave. The leave policies are quite extensive. And so we partnered again with an HR representative. Once my team completed the review of the policy to ensure that it was compliant, then we sent that over to Human Resources for one final look and sign off, which then transitions us to the next step, HRIS, the configuration. So I had a team that worked on the configuration and also on the testing before we went live. The change piece is something that can really make it or break it. And I've said this before to Danny, I've also said before to Angie and to many who have actually worked with me. We can do all this work. You can do the harmonization, the standardization, 130 processes, what have you. But if you don't manage the change, all that work will be for naught. So we did partner with Angie. She was on the team. And we then mapped out how do we communicate the change. And there are 2 ways to get this done. So you have to do both. One is to ensure that you go over the training. So we sat with them, we reviewed the process, we called out any step outs, which to be honest, there weren't that many, which is great. But once you do that, you also have to then circle back and conduct a training. So what is that new way of working? And we did a lot of wows. There were many of those. And then the behaviors, which is really where this tool really came into play. What are the behaviors now? An example, we also, by the way, implemented ServiceNow, which is where then the policies are stored. But the behavior of now you have an employee who will use this tool as opposed to going to human resources when they have a question. There were many, many changes, especially to what we call the subscale countries, non-US, UK, Ireland, because they were used to doing the paperwork, onboarding manually a new hire, which is now being done completely differently, automation. So we are not done with the project. We actually went live with phase 1 June 30th, and as I mentioned previously, we will be going live with the remainder of the countries by the end of the year. So more training. I will say that the change is ongoing. The change management, it's not something that's going to stop. It has to continue and evolve. And then the last step is then the continuous improvement, which is also something near and dear to my heart. But as we continue now to work with these processes and we continue to evolve, it will give us all the opportunity to call out any improvements. And that's also something else that we will be focusing on for 2026. So that is in a nutshell the project. I don't know if there's any questions. If you wanted to step in, Angie, because we worked very, very closely on this project. So.
Yeah, Angie, I'd love to
so
hear
a couple of
from
things
you.
I'll highlight.
Go for it.
Okay, great, thanks. So a couple of things I'll highlight from that story that we did from a change perspective is we were able to, I just want to clear that out if I can. So one of the things that we did was we were at a large scale. So I was on the project for a year helping with change management. And in that time, there was a lot of moving parts as Yvette just described. So there was a global team that was managing the technology, managing the other departments, which we were focused on HR, but there were other departments that were undergoing this transformation as well. And so as a part of this larger change team, my responsibility was to help HR make the jump of this transformation. So some of the work that was underway while all of those things were happening as well that Yvette was leading was helping the HR leadership team align, helping them understand helping them create the org design changes that were required to support this new operating model, and also for them to know how to communicate and lead their team. So there was a lot of work done at the leadership level, which those of you who are change consultants or change agents would recognize that for sure, getting clear in alignment there. There's a lot of focus on doing that. Then, as you may or may not know, that change is more successful when it is leader-led but employee-managed, employee-engaged. So when employees are engaged, but leaders are helping to create the guardrails, if you will, or the container in which the change occurs, change is much more successful and significantly more successful. So having employee involvement is key. And so the employees were involved, HR employees were involved in all the process harmonization and standardization that Yvette had led and was leading, and her team was involved as well as the other stakeholders and representatives were involved. So we had employee engagement there. But change is also about learning and unlearning things with the way that the organization works, so the ways of working. So that is when I constructed these large group sessions to which we use the Hyperspace platform for. And I'm going to show you a picture here of a few of the things so that we can, so that you can see what I'm talking about. So what I'm showing here is some of the session that as it occurred within the Hyperspace platform. So we were able to set up tables just as we would do live. You know, we had 5 people at every table. We were able to have people in conversation. I was able to have screens in the front of the room, in the back of the room, and you could see that people were able to interact. It's really interesting though, because psychologically, people felt a sense of being together, despite the fact that they were all sitting at different computer screens, but a sense of being together, and there's a lot of ways to interact. I was able to set up, with the help of the Hyperspace team, was able to set up some pairs discussions, which we were able to have those breakouts where I gave them a question and they could discuss it regarding a change to the process, what was something that they were interested in knowing more about, or a change that they noticed. I was able to add processes that Yvette's team had harmonized and standardized. I added them to the room so that the teams, these regional teams, could come into the space, interact, as well as put up their, they could interact with the process as well. And so that engagement, that employee engagement, the discussion, the dialogue, the questions, we could hear where the resistance was. We could understand what was unknown. It really helped us be able to tailor some of the intensive training that was required following these sessions. So these large group sessions were a big piece of the change in helping. We ran 7 sessions over the course of 2 weeks, and having those multiple people participating at any time. We had about 25 people invited to each session. And so it was we had a good turnout, and it was a big process to get everybody involved. And we had traditional learning and development training following these sessions. Here is the end of session on the rooftop, where we were able to throw up emojis and everybody was able to celebrate. And we had some different poses that the avatars could be in. This was probably the highlight of everything, just having some fun and being in this really neat setting where people could interact. We snapped a picture, and then we were off and running back to the day-to-day. So another piece of the learning and unlearning that we did was, prior to these rehearsal sessions within the Hyperspace platform, we also did some micro sessions with just the leaders, the executive team of HR and the mid-level leaders, directors and above, to help them get their questions answered first. So we ran 3 micro sessions on some really tricky, sticky topics that we knew were going to be holdups for this HR transformation. And we had those deep dive discussions so that the leaders could further and enhance their understanding of what needed to change prior to jumping into those big, large group sessions in the rehearsal setting. So we did the micro sessions with leaders, which had followed the executive team alignment sessions. Then we did the rehearsals. Then we followed on with more specific employee training, which became even more obvious as a need as the rollout and the waves progressed. We realized that there was more specific training that was needed, not so much with the technology that was implemented for case management within HR to the centralized service team, but we were also aware that there were some processes that needed a bit of touch up so that the HR business partners could really understand what was changing for them, because some of them had been doing it according to the standardized, centralized way, and some of them had not. And so we had that added complexity in there, which we had to address with some specific training that followed.
One of the things I do want to add is one of the processes that had been a real headache in the U.S. was actually the leave of absence. It was being done very different ways throughout the U.S. We were able to harmonize that process. We even have a standard policy, finally. But lots of kudos when we launched that using this platform to be able to have an avatar and have representation from every swim lane owner and have an employee go through the process. So we did play out the whole process using this platform. The feedback I got back, that was great. Not only were we able to harmonize, but we left there with a really good understanding of when does the manager step in, when does HR step in, and when should the employee reach out to the carrier directly. We had an avatar for every single swim lane owner.
Mm-hmm.
That worked.
Yeah, that was a self-guided tour of the process. So the the avatars were acting out or reading through a script, and each avatar was talking through the parts of the process. And we had the process in the room up on the screen in the room. We also had an understanding we were able to set up in that exact same room, which would cost a ton of money if done at a hotel or in a conference center. We also had the roles and responsibilities for every swim lane listed in the room. So you could see the roles and responsibilities, you could see the process, and hear a case study acted out by the avatars, all in the same room. So it really was a learning setting intended for that complex process of U.S. leaves of absence. And it worked really well. And people spent a good amount of time. And we had a quiz on the other side of that. So when everybody left that room and came back to the main room, we did a knowledge check to see how much they had gained from being a part of that room. And that was fun. It was really just to see who was paying attention, and they voted by emoji. So that was fun. Nothing scientific.
I know we don't have a screenshot of that, but it was a room where people would go in individually, right? It wasn't multi-user where people were seeing each other, but instead it was a self-paced journey where people could engage with those characters and the processes, correct?
Actually, they all went in at the same time, so we sent the entire group there, and that because of the way that the Hyperspace system is set up, they went on their own journey once they were in there. So they entered the room, and then they were able to just go through and interact with each of the avatars at their own individual learner pace there. Yeah.
Terrific. Well, this is actually very interesting. I think some things that people might be interested in are how do you measure the effectiveness of these initiatives? How do we find out how the impact is working over time?
I can answer that.
Yeah,
One of the so I had mentioned ServiceNow, which a lot of work having to lead this project where we're now outsourcing to a BPO. But while we're at it, let's just throw in ServiceNow, which is a very good tool as well. But what we've been able to do, Danny, is we've been able to run dashboards and metrics, which highlight for us. It does call out the behaviors, like are employees going directly and doing what they should be doing? Are they reaching out to the BPO? Or is HR still doing what they really shouldn't be doing? They should be strategic partners. They're not, they shouldn't be doing admin work, right? Operational work. And by running the metrics on a weekly basis, we were able to see and monitor and track where the behaviors, where there were pockets, states, little towns in Iowa, where they weren't really doing what they should be doing, and that was just a matter of getting on a call with them. What can we do so that we can change that behavior? But we saw where there was the positive, and we were seeing the change. So to be able to track that month by month was very helpful, and it did confirm that the communication of the processes, the training, et cetera, we were starting to see the behaviors change. The beginning was not easy, though. I'm not going to fool you. It was very difficult, but we went live June, and we're starting to see some really, really good numbers.
Fantastic. Well, I think this is actually a good segue into where we're headed in the future, specifically around AI. So I'd like to, open just to thoughts here about, and so maybe even some, works that have been done around how the role of AI. I mean, obviously, the more touch points you can have with your colleagues to find out where they're at in that journey of change and how to assess that is really beneficial. And people are short of time. People are lacking attention. They have other distractions, work commitments to take care of. So we're always vying for time from people in the workforce. So I'd be interested to discuss how AI can play a role in these type of significant change or even minor change management within organizations. I can probably talk about this for days, but Angie, maybe if you can kick off the conversation.
Sure, thanks. That's a great question, and one I think about often. I think that the challenge with change, despite the fact that it is continuous these days, which is a challenge, is that many of us in our organizations don't get a lot of chance to practice change. So practice changing, practice what we would say, how we would lead, leaders being able to practice how they might lead their teams through change. There's such a magnifying glass on leaders these days. It can often feel like you need to do it perfectly. And so getting a chance to practice would be really helpful. I think that's a great use of AI, is to be able to set up a challenge and then of what might come in the change, or for the leader to be able to input a challenge into like a generative model and be able to rehearse what they might say, or not so that it becomes scripted, but just so that they get a couple of reps under their belt around, oh, okay, I see how I could think about it this way, or I think how I can change my language. Like I even think about, I use the tool Grammarly quite a bit in my writing to be able to help me just be more succinct. And, you know, ChatGPT as well does this, and we can, you know, just get some feedback right there. Small feedback from, you know, an AI assistant in those two applications, but that feedback, you know, teaches me as the person that's asking the question how I can be more succinct, or how I can sound more confident in my writing. What would that look like? And I think we could do the same in change for leaders, to give them a few practice rounds so that they can help themselves be much more successful in working with their teams.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because as a manager, going out to your team and instituting change sometimes feels like a risk, right? You're exposing yourself. You may not be the expert in that field yet, but as you know the value of the business, introducing the change to the team will have a net benefit, but you're exposing yourself to, you know, the way things have always been done, and been nice and secure and warm and comfortable. By having an AI people-centric experience, we can go in, talk to representatives that would be like your team members, and you get to practice, you know, how to communicate that, how it goes down, maybe feel and discuss some of the objections, right, to actually see what that feels like and see how you'd handle them, and run through that a couple of times before bringing that to your team. But also you might have a number of ideas about people in your team that might be resistant to change, and being able to do those challenges with the AI where it's set up to give you those resistant type personalities, you can then see how you address it. But more importantly, with the AI, at least with the training we're doing, the good thing about AI is not just the natural language discussion you can have, which feels very normal and in the moment. So you get to practice being you rather than, you know, calculating everything, which is very helpful. But even more helpful is the feedback you can get almost immediately from the AI characters about what you're doing well, what you're doing poorly, and advice on how you can improve in the next round. And on top of that, that each discussion you have can be different. So you can practice a whole range of different objections or challenges that you might have across your team and be ready for them before you put yourself in front of them. And that's a great piece of value. I think that's a really interesting part of it. But there's also, you could maybe discuss a little bit about how it can apply to the team members as well.
Sure. So I think that, you know, team members getting their input considered is really done usually by survey or interviews or focus groups, and this environment could offer them in an anonymous way to come in, talk to an avatar, and share their input on how the change is going. So creating this room, sometimes when we set up large-scale transformation change projects, we will have a room where people can come in and they can place Post-it notes anonymously, and those Post-it notes in those rooms in real life would be a place where we could go and see how things are going. I've done that technique in the past. And that helps gather up kind of like that in the moment response, how things are going and what might need to change, or people's instantaneous reaction, if you will, to some of the things that are ongoing with the change, or ways that they've been addressed throughout the change. So that's really helpful data that helps guide and shape the change. And so if we translate that real life experience into the hyperspace world, having employees be able to enter the space whenever it's convenient to them, maybe it's the start of the day, maybe it's the end of the day, maybe it's right in the middle and they're totally fed up just having exited a town hall, and they exit through the Hyperspace platform and they drop their ideas there to be collected and synthesized. if they're talking with one of the avatars, an AI avatar that can collect that information, then we aren't sending out those surveys and we're capturing people's voice, truly voice, right? So that we can hear the words, the language they're using, the ways that they're describing the change. All of that helps us to understand and helps the organization to see itself and see its impact, to see what is the story that people are making up about the significance of this change or the progression of this change. And that is really helpful information if we're thinking about how we can convey benefits differently to people or help people see where they might be misinterpreting the desired outcome or the intention that has been conveyed, maybe hasn't been conveyed properly, and there's a need to realign and help create a stronger sense of shared understanding, which is usually the number one and two issues that happen and prevent change or cause change to stall or be paralyzed, right? Is when there's that lack of alignment or lack of shared understanding, people are headed off in multiple directions. So I think that this would be a great space to have employees jump into and just have a quick chat, that 5-minute chat with an AI avatar to share their thoughts, their thoughts on how the change is going. Could be guided with specific questions, or it could just be in general, what sense are you making of this change right now? And how is it going to impact you?
I think the key to all of this, really, if I'm understanding correctly, is listening to your workforce, being able to listen. And we can do that as great managers or champions in the organization, have the ability to listen really well and try and bring that into the organization's awareness. But using AI in the way you're describing allows you to do that at scale, and may even allow you to highlight and get visibility on new ideas being contributed by people that you didn't expect, or uncovering champions of change across the organization who are just itching to contribute, but may not have the loudest voice. But through this AI discussions analysis, that might bring these opportunities more to the forefront. Is that something that sounds like a future for organizational change?
I would say yes. Yeah.
Have you been exploring AI? How do you listen to your workforce at the moment? What's the best way to, at scale, get input from people?
I think we haven't. I think the closest that we've gotten to AI is the Copilot. I think many of us here on the call are familiar with Copilot, this platform. In terms of feedback and input, we're still using a survey that, you send a link to the employee and they click on the link and they provide the feedback. So I think that we're still, we're not there yet, but it's not something that we wouldn't be looking at.
Yeah, I think surveys are really, really effective, but there's a certain point, right, where there's survey blindness. You can't send one every day. You have to time them out. So there's, people don't just fill them out without consideration. And I think that's where the AI conversations can really shine, that you get a chance to really engage someone. They're paying attention. They can be relatively short. And through that conversation, more value can be extracted than you may get in a survey. So you can, what we've been doing with learning and training, we can say what we want the scenarios to be, and the AI will generate a scenario that does that challenge based on the rubric or outcomes we're looking for. If we're looking to test communication skills or empathy or anything like that, the AI builds the discussion around that. So the same can go with surveys. It's not as finite as surveys, so it's a different, I think the two can be complementary. But it's, less finite, but you can extract more value, and that's the benefit of AI. And the AI can, kind of review and consolidate the findings, even anonymously, so you're not necessarily, if you want to find something like how do people feel about the company, it might be good and bad, and you just want that indicator rather than, holding anyone accountable for how they feel and feeling threatened about that. So anonymous AI, that can listen. So basically, your corporate therapist, everything stays confident, but you're able to express how you feel. So these are just some ideas on how AI can contribute to change. I'd like to know what do we see as the future for AI across the organization. We've definitely, there's learning and training, there's change management, but I'd like to know where we see it sitting, and also after that maybe discussion of some of the tools. You mentioned Copilot, which I think is great, that people in the organization are actually engaged in using the tools, and that's available. I think that's the first step to making AI a part of the workflow. But yeah, I'd definitely like to know where we think it could be headed whose responsibility is it for? Is it HR? Is it innovation? Is it strategy? Is it the board level? Where is this change going to be implemented from? Is it IT? That would be interesting.
I would say IT within our organization, and we recently had a meeting where we sat with the IT folks and talked about what do we have in store for 2026. We have so much going on with this project. I mean, as I said, the remaining of the countries are going to go live. I think we're going to be really focusing on the stabilization and the continuous improvement. Whether AI can play a role into that, I would say yes. There's one of the things that I'm very familiar with, and I'll give the example, is when you're working within a call center, and you have so many reps, being able to use AI to kind of look at these cases and be able to weed out those that really aren't cases, to be able to help us work smarter. AI is something that we all will be looking more into. I think that Glanbia is just getting their toe in the water. I think there's going to be more to come. Is it going to be in 2026? It's really hard for me to really answer that. But the way that it would work within our organization is, it would really be us working very closely with IT, because of course, whatever we end up doing will require a budget. And that's when you then have to make sure that you do have the business case to then make the request to our top leadership. So
makes sense.
We have the toe in the water, Danny. And I think it's just going to continue to evolve.
Well, it's already obvious that Glanbia is, approaching innovation at a number of different fronts. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the execution use of AI into 2026 will look pretty incredible. And not to forget that every major software platform is also doing their own research and providing solutions. So, it's really something that's being offered across the board. So you get, really, for every organization that's investing and looking into this, you've got consultants and people that are willing to share with you how that might benefit an organization. So I think it's really terrific, and it's great to be a part of that journey. I mean, one of the challenges I see with AI is accelerating so quickly, and that in itself is a change management challenge, where the technology is becoming able to do new things month after month, sometimes week after week. And what we used to have is we'd have an upheaval as far as some technology goes, or some new way of doing business, or even policies and regulations. Things would change, and we'd then adapt and find our new comfort zone with how things are going to be. But looking at the rate of change in AI, I believe that we're in for now consistent accelerating change, which is a challenge. Organizations may need to stay ahead. They may need to have competitive advantage. You may not be able to charge for your time anymore, but really for your outcomes. How quickly can you use these tools to create real value? So if things are going to change consistently, then change management becomes an even more critical part of nearly every business. And so I see the role of change management and AI just accelerating and becoming a thing where people need to be taught to be comfortable with consistent change. And I think that's creating a new type of mindset. And I think that may be the challenge that we're looking at in the next 3 to 5 years for people skills, because it means we get out of our comfort zone all the more frequently. Be interested in your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the mindset shift is going to be it'll be subtle and incredibly difficult all at the same time, which will make it feel not subtle to those that experience it. But we still think about change as a top-down approach and a very planned approach and implementation focused, right? So go live dates, launch dates, all of those things are still associated with change management, very project management, technology implemented, focused for change. And one could believe that because of the introduction of AI, that it requires an IT implementation approach to change. But I think that it will be more of a pruning approach for change, right? Where many people try many things to be able to see what fits within the workspace, given the division that they support. Maybe in finance, it's one thing. In HR, it's another way of adopting AI. Maybe in IT, it's an entirely different way of adopting AI. But for every part of the business, there will be different factors of AI that will make the most sense. And there'll be this connection between where AI can support and enhance the strengths of the business or strengths of that part of the business. And I think that's where leaders will need to be able to spot those strength matchups between where AI can enhance the strength of their part of the business and be able to grow that and really fuel and feed that strengths-based approach and prune off the things that are no longer working or don't work or AI can't assist. Because if we take a blanket approach that AI can help everything, then your resources are spread far too thin and you won't be able to truly take advantage of what AI has to offer by deep dive into it. And it requires training, it requires precision, it requires checking in on that, right? So that you're not running a business on hallucinations. There is some management that's required with AI, and we're only just beginning to see what it is that's possible. And so having that approach of pruning as opposed to rolling out AI as a technology implementation, I think is going to be a really big mindset for leaders to see it in that way. And I'm sure there'll be other ways. That's just the first idea that's just what I've been thinking about is how do you address, this is continuous change that's happening all across the business, all at once. And so much of it is non-controllable. So therefore, putting in rigorous time or milestone dates and all those things to try and track the change almost becomes a worthless effort. So thinking about it and noticing where the strengths are, where the matchups are, working with what works, and pruning off quickly those things that are a waste of time and effort, so that leaders can really focus in on what's working for the change and grow that.
Fantastic. That's a very interesting approach. I hadn't thought about it that way. Yvette, do you have any comments on the role of AI across the organization and the massive change that might ensue?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Angie, but I think, and I'm speaking solely from Glanbia, also a prior organization that I was with, it's going to take some time. And, the company tends to immediately look at IT. That's not to say that the ideas can't come from us. And so at Glanbia, we are truly a partner when it comes to digital HR. We work extremely closely. So, you know, HR can say, you know, we've heard of this, we have this suggestion, and we definitely are true partners. And it really helps us build the case when we have to then go and request it. I think that we're still early on. I think that the company will look towards IT to kind of say, yeah, this makes sense. You know, what Yvette is suggesting we do does make sense. It's going to take some time. Are there companies out there that are maybe further along? I'm sure there are, but not the company I'm with and not the company I was with prior.
Yeah, it feels like we're just getting, you know, halfway through digital transformation, let alone AI transformation.
Yeah, you got it.
Look, we are at time, so you know, I think there's many more topics to cover, but I really want to thank you for your involvement today and your contribution and sharing some of the works you've been doing. They are incredible, they are fascinating, they are full of innovation, but also real impact in organizations. So I'm thrilled to have been able to talk about that today. So Yvette, Angie, I really want to thank you for your time with us. I don't see any questions in the Q&A at the moment, but we can definitely answer any questions over in the AI Mixer. We're going to teleport everyone over to the AI Mixer space. There's free drinks for your avatar. We can have a bit of a chat and communicate with each other. There's also some AI avatars there that are change management challenges, so you'll be able to chat with them and have a bit of an experience. So again, Angie, Yvette, thank you so much, and to everyone here who's joined us, I appreciate your time and to listening to what we have to share with you, and we'll see you over in the AI Mixer space.